Donald Trump was never one to shy away from the spotlight. His presence was always larger than life, commanding attention wherever he went. His pronouncements, often delivered with characteristic bluntness, had a history of igniting controversy and captivating the world's attention. Whether you loved him or hated him, you couldn't ignore him. So when it was rumored that he was about to break his silence on Pope Francis and the pontiff's increasingly influential global policies, the world held its breath. The media buzzed with speculation, and people everywhere were glued to their screens. The anticipation was palpable. Conversations in cafes, offices, and homes revolved around what Trump might say. Trump and Francis represented two vastly different worldviews, two contrasting approaches to power and morality. A clash seemed inevitable. Trump, with his background in business and reality television, projected an image of strength and national self-interest. He was a man who thrived on conflict and competition. He often spoke in the language of deals, of winners and losers. His rhetoric was sharp, his demeanor unapologetic. Francis, on the other hand, was a Jesuit priest, steeped in the traditions of Catholic social teaching, a tradition that emphasized humility, compassion, and a preferential option for the poor. His approach was one of dialogue and understanding. The world waited, wondering what sparks would fly when these two titans finally met, albeit indirectly on the world stage. The tension was almost tangible. Would Trump respect the Pope's moral authority, or would he launch into one of his trademark tirades? The stakes were high. The potential for a historic moment was undeniable. The eyes of the world were upon them, waiting to see what would unfold in this unprecedented encounter. Pope Francis had become a global figure of immense moral stature, admired and respected by millions around the world. He had captured the imagination of Catholics and non-Catholics alike with his humility, his emphasis on mercy, and his willingness to address controversial issues head-on. His approach was seen as a breath of fresh air in a world often divided by strife and conflict. From the moment he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, he had signaled a new tone, a new style of papacy. His simple wave and warm smile conveyed a message of openness and inclusivity. He chose the name Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, the saint of poverty and peace. This choice was a clear indication of the values he intended to uphold during his papacy. He shunned the opulent papal apartments, opting for a modest suite in a Vatican guest house. This decision was symbolic of his commitment to living a life of simplicity and humility. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced the sick and marginalized, and challenged the powerful to care for the least among us. His actions spoke louder than words, demonstrating his dedication to social justice and compassion. On the global stage, Pope Francis had made climate change a signature issue, arguing that caring for creation was a moral imperative. He called for urgent action to protect our planet for future generations. He had spoken out forcefully against economic inequality, calling for a more just and equitable global order. His advocacy for the poor and marginalized resonated with many who felt left behind by the global economy. And he had made interfaith dialogue a cornerstone of his papacy, reaching out to Muslims, Jews, and people of other faiths in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding. His efforts to build bridges between different religious communities were widely praised and seen as a path toward greater global harmony. The storm finally broke on a Tuesday morning, shattering the uneasy calm that had settled over the city. The skies darkened, and the air was thick with anticipation. Trump, true to form, took to his preferred medium, unleashing a series of tweets that reverberated around the world. His words were like lightning bolts, striking with precision and causing immediate reactions. The tweets were classic Trump, short, sharp, and utterly devoid of diplomatic niceties. They spread like wildfire, igniting debates and discussions across social media platforms. He accused the Pope of being out of touch and naive on climate change, dismissing the pontiff's concerns with a wave of his hand. He dismissed the Pope's pronouncements on social justice as socialist nonsense, showing no regard for the complexities of the issues at hand. And he implied that the Pope's efforts at interfaith dialogue were misguided and dangerous, weakening the West in the face of radical Islam. His words were a stark contrast to the Pope's message of unity and peace. The language was harsh, the tone confrontational. It was clear that Trump was not interested in diplomacy or reconciliation. Trump made no attempt to soften his words or to find common ground. His approach was direct and unapologetic, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He seemed almost to relish the confrontation, the opportunity to portray himself as the defender of Western civilization against the forces of political correctness and globalism. His supporters cheered, seeing him as a strong leader unafraid to speak his mind, forces he believed were embodied in the person of Pope Francis. The clash between these two powerful figures was more than just a war of words. It was a battle for the soul of the modern world. The response from the Vatican was swift but measured. The Vatican spokesman, while expressing disappointment at Trump's remarks, stressed the need for continued dialogue and engagement. He reiterated the Pope's commitment to finding common ground on issues of shared concern, such as climate change and poverty. The statement was a model of diplomatic restraint, a stark contrast to Trump's inflammatory rhetoric. However, beneath the surface of official pronouncements, there was a sense of shock and dismay within the Vatican. Pope Francis had become accustomed to being treated with respect, even reverence, by world leaders. Trump's willingness to attack him so directly and so publicly was unprecedented. It suggested that Trump saw the papacy as just another institution to be bullied or belittled, another obstacle in the path of his own ambition. Trump's pronouncements were met with predictable cheers from his base of support. Conservative commentators and politicians rallied to his defense, praising his willingness to stand up to the liberal elite and to defend traditional values. They echoed Trump's criticisms of the Pope, accusing him of being too focused on worldly concerns and not focused enough on the spiritual needs of his flock. For Trump's supporters, the Pope's pronouncements on climate change, social justice, and interfaith dialogue were seen as evidence of a dangerous drift toward liberalism, a betrayal of the Church's traditional role as a bulwark against secularism and moral relativism. In their eyes, Trump, not the Pope, was the true defender of the faith. The media, as expected, went into overdrive. Cable news channels provided wall-to-wall coverage, with talking heads dissecting every word of Trump's tweets and the Vatican's response. Newspapers rushed to publish editorials and op-eds, some praising Trump's boldness, others condemning his recklessness. Social media platforms were abuzz with commentary, much of it heated and polarized. The clash between Trump and the Pope became the story of the day, pushing aside other news, both domestic and international. It was a story that had everything celebrity, religion, politics, and a healthy dose of international intrigue. It was a story that seemed to tap into deeper anxieties and divisions within Western societies, anxieties about the future of the planet, the role of religion in public life, and the very meaning of truth and morality. At its core, the clash between Trump and Pope Francis was a clash of ideologies, a clash between two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. Trump represented a kind of muscular nationalism, a belief in the primacy of national interest, and the importance of projecting strength on the world stage. He was skeptical of international institutions and agreements, seeing them as constraints on American power and sovereignty. Pope Francis, on the other hand, represented a more universalist vision, a belief in the interconnectedness of all peoples and the need for global cooperation to address common challenges such as climate change and poverty. He saw the nation-state as an important but ultimately limited vehicle for achieving human flourishing. For him, true progress required transcending national borders and embracing a more inclusive and equitable global order. The impact of Trump's pronouncements on public opinion was difficult to gauge in the immediate aftermath. Polls showed that Americans remained deeply divided on issues such as climate change, social justice, and the role of religion in public life. It was unclear whether Trump's words would move the needle one way or the other. However, there were some indications that Trump's willingness to attack a figure as revered as Pope Francis might have backfired, particularly among Catholic voters, a key demographic in American politics. Some Catholic commentators expressed concern that Trump's rhetoric was alienating moderate and independent voters who might otherwise be receptive to his message. In the end, the clash between Trump and Pope Francis served as a stark reminder of the deep divisions that existed within Western societies and indeed within the world as a whole. It was a reminder that the old certainties, the old ways of understanding the world were breaking down, replaced by a more fluid and uncertain landscape. It remained to be seen how these divisions would play out in the years to come. Would they lead to greater conflict and polarization, or would they create new opportunities for dialogue and understanding? The answer perhaps lay in the hands of ordinary people, people of goodwill, who were willing to bridge divides, to listen to one another, and to seek common ground. The future of the world might depend on it. Please subscribe to our channel History Documentary Hub for more insightful videos and intriguing content.